For centuries, we've been arguing about free will. It's one of those huge questions. But what if the answer wasn't tucked away in some dusty philosophy textbook, but was actually deep inside the wiring of our own brains? Well, today, we're diving into a fascinating paper that explores exactly that: how modern neuroscience is completely reshaping this ancient debate about choice, freedom, and ultimately, responsibility. And this right here is the big, kind of unsettling question at the heart of it all. I mean, think about it. If we can map out every single neuron, every synapse, every little electrical pulse that leads you to make a decision, does that mean your choice was basically a done deal from the start? Are you really the pilot, or are you just a very sophisticated passenger in this incredibly complex biological machine? And that right there brings us to the central conflict we're exploring. There's this growing fear, this anxiety that as neuroscience gets better and better at explaining the mechanics of the brain, it might just explain away the very idea of you making a choice at all. Yeah, the worry is actually pretty easy to grasp. If every single thought, every decision is just the end result of a physical process, a predictable chain of cause and effect, then where does freedom even fit into that picture? It starts to feel like our sense of agency is, as the paper puts it, just a quaint fiction, a nice story we tell ourselves about a machine that was going to do what it was going to do anyway. Okay, so before we jump into the brain scans and all that cool stuff, let's get our bearings with a quick philosophical map. This debate has been raging for a long, long time, so it's good to know the main players. At its core, this whole debate really boils down to two completely different ways of looking at the universe. On one side, you've got determinism. Think of it like a perfect row of dominoes. Once you knock over that first one, every single thing that happens after that is completely set in stone. It's all cause and effect. On the other side, you have indeterminism. This view says, nope, there's some real randomness baked into the universe, like a roll of the dice at the quantum level. The future isn't fixed. But hold on, what if it's not a simple either-or choice? That's where this idea called compatibilism comes into the picture. Compatibilists basically argue that even if the universe is just one giant deterministic chain of cause and effect, our ideas about free will and responsibility can still make total sense. For them, freedom isn't about breaking the laws of physics. It's about something else entirely. So check out this map. It shows how all these different ideas connect. The big question in the middle is, are free will and determinism compatible? If you say no, you're an incompatibilist. And from there, you could be a hard determinist who says, well, determinism is true, so free will must be an illusion. Or you could be a libertarian who argues, we definitely have free will, so the universe must have some of that random stuff in it. As we're about to see, neuroscience actually finds some really compelling arguments on that compatibilist side of the map.
All right, that's enough philosophy for now. Let's actually head into the lab and see how your brain really makes a decision.
So one of the main ways scientists study this is with a super simple but really clever task. A person, or sometimes a monkey, just watches a screen full of moving dots. Most of them are moving randomly, but a small percentage are all drifting in the same direction. The job is just to say, are they moving left or are they moving right? It's a basic choice, but it lets us watch the brain in the actual process of making up its mind.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. While that's happening, scientists are looking at a part of the brain called the LIP. And what they see is that the neurons in there act like tiny little accountants. As the dots move, these neurons are gradually adding up the evidence for left or for right. You can literally see their firing rate climbing and climbing as they build a case for one choice over the other. It's amazing.
So this whole process, it actually has a name. It's called bounded accumulation. You can think of it like a race. The neural activity is kind of wandering back and forth as new evidence trickles in. But the second it hits a preset finish line, what they call a bound, that's it. The decision is made. Bang, the brain commits. And this is the crucial part. Where do you set that finish line? Right? If you set that bound really low, you're going to make decisions super fast, but you might make more mistakes. If you set it really high, you'll be way more accurate, but you're going to be slower. Deciding where to set that bound, well, that is what the paper calls a policy. It's like a high-level strategy, a rule book for how you're going to approach the problem. So we've got this model for how a decision gets made, but we are missing a huge piece of the puzzle. And that's the constant, inescapable static that's always buzzing around in the system. Some people hear randomness and think, aha, that's where freedom comes from. But a lot of philosophers point out that pure chance isn't really freedom either. Like this quote says, chance is as relentless as necessity. A choice that's made by a totally random coin flip isn't really your choice any more than a choice made by a gear turning in a clock. So that leads us to a really, really fundamental question. If randomness isn't the answer, then why on earth is the brain so noisy? Why is there so much random variability in our neural signals, even when our brain is processing the exact same information over and over?
Well, the paper argues that this noise isn't a bug. It's a feature. It's basically the price the brain pays for being so incredibly powerful. See, to do all its amazing calculations, the brain has to maintain this delicate high-wire act, a perfect balance between signals that say go and signals that say stop. This constant push and pull creates what we perceive as noise, but it's also what allows our neurons to be so incredibly responsive and flexible.
And this is the absolute kicker. The rest of the brain, the parts that are trying to make a decision, can't actually tell the difference between the real signal coming from the outside world and this internal noise. A neuron fires? Was that because of strong evidence, or was it just a random hiccup inside the system? The brain itself doesn't know. It's working with fundamentally uncertain information about its own state. So this unavoidable uncertainty, it changes everything. It forces the brain to come up with strategies to deal with it. And according to this paper, that is precisely where we can find a whole new foundation for responsibility. Okay, so here's the core argument, laid out in 4 simple steps. Step 1, neural noise is just a fact of life for our brains. Step 2, this noise creates constant uncertainty. Step 3, to deal with all that uncertainty, the brain creates policies, like that speed versus accuracy trade-off we talked about. And step 4, it is in these high-level policies, these strategies, that we can actually locate things like agency and responsibility. The paper gives this absolutely brilliant example to make it clear. Imagine 3 doctors. Dr. A is in a rush. She values speed, so she makes a hasty diagnosis and gets it wrong. Dr. B is more careful. She values accuracy, takes her time, and gets it right. Then you have Dr. C, who is also careful, but in a life or death emergency, she's just too slow. See, we don't judge them based on some random neuron firing in their brain. We judge them based on the policies they chose to adopt. Fast, careful, or maybe too careful for the situation. It's the policy that matters.
So the big takeaway here is that neuroscience doesn't actually kill the idea of responsibility. Not at all. In fact, it gives us a brand new place to look for it. It isn't in some magical, non-physical will floating around somewhere. It's in the very real, very physical policies our brains create to guide their own noisy, messy, complex machinery.
I think this view is so powerful because it reframes everything. It suggests that our responsibility doesn't lie in one single isolated moment of choice, but in the kind of character and policies we build over time that shape all our decisions. But, of course, this just leads us to an even deeper and maybe trickier question. If our policies are what define us, who or what sets the policy? And with that thought, we'll leave you to deliberate.